Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Gyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidyat Ravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So does the box need to be pulled? Can someone check that for me?
It's okay.
Okay. And what verse are we on?
On verse 25.
Verse 25, we're almost done. So we are in chapter 5, verse 25. Will you help us out, please?
Labante brahma nirvana mrishaya kshina kalmashaha chinna dvaidhaya tatmanaha sarva bhuta hiterataha. Those rishis obtain absolute freedom or moksha, whose sins have been destroyed, whose dualities are torn asunder, who are self-controlled and intent on the welfare of all beings.
So, again, at one level, you and I are mumukshus, we're seekers after liberation, and we work on achieving some level of purity of the equipment. I'm reading a fascinating book, rereading it. It's been 50 years since I read it with a student. It's called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, the very famous Tibetan Lama. And this chapter is on humor. And one of the things he's talking about, his definition of spiritual materialism, is when our state of mind, our state of consciousness, our behaviors start to become another possession. And of course, the opposite arises. I think I'm doing so well, and then oops, I get triggered, or I behave badly. And then I want to hide it. Not so much even from other people, but I want to hide it from myself. And then he talks about humor, being able to see the irony of the paradox of this. So the way I like to say it, you cannot make the equipment perfect. It is like trying to count to the highest number. If you think about it, the equipment is by definition finite. But yoga says that process is only a preliminary process. What we've been working on in this chapter is get out. So Wendy and I were talking before class about neti, not this, not this. So I am not the bad thoughts, and I'm not the good thoughts. That untouched witness of the law. So the woman of wisdom is identified with that space of consciousness that's never touched. One of the terms we get is near mullam. Who can tell me what near mullam means?
Stain free?
Yeah, without any dirt or without a stain. Nothing touches it. And this gives us peace. And we're much less likely to behave in a reactive way in the world. Because that's quieted. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Okay.
Please.
Kama krodha viyuktanam yatinam yatachetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Absolute freedom or Brahmic bliss exists on all sides for those self-controlled ascetics who are free from desire and anger, who have controlled their thoughts, and who have realized the self.
So how do we control the mind when I see the fundamental unreality of the mind? And here he uses, translated as Brahmic bliss, but the word in Sanskrit, if I heard you correctly, was nirvana, right?
Yeah.
Which literally means blown out. It's a word used in Gita, which is older than Buddhism. The Buddhists borrow the term from the yogis. Nirvana is not a place. Oh, I'm going to get enlightened and then I'm going to go to Nirvana. It's next to Emeryville. Nirvana is not a place. The metaphor is a candle or actually an oil lamp. And the flame is the mind and ignorance that's still caught under the influence of kama and krodha. I want. And in the end, even the desire for liberation is there. I want to be free. I want to be liberated. Or more subtle, I want a wackadoodle mind state. I want to get higher, you know. I want. And the knowledge of the self does when the kama, the Vesha, God is when all our strivings cease. There's nothing more to do, nothing to be accomplished. In modern New Agey spirituality, so frequently, it's not the destination, it's the journey. You heard that one? not true. It is possible to quit the struggle. There's nothing left to be accomplished. This is Sabbath rest, the deepest meaning of the Hebrew word Sabbath, Shabbat. This is near. Next one.
It's 2 verses together. Sparshan kritva bahir pramyam ashchakshushchevan tare bhruvo pranapano samo kritva nasabhyantara charino yatendriya mano buddhir munir moksha parayana vigatecha bhaya krodho yasada mukta eva sa. Shutting out all external contacts and fixing the gaze as though between the eyebrows, equalizing the outgoing and incoming breath, moving within the nostrils, with senses, mind, and intellect ever controlled, having liberation as his supreme goal, free from desire, fear, and anger. The sage is very liberated forever.
Very or verily?
Oh, verily. Sorry.
Yes. So here he's giving us a foretaste of the 6th chapter, Abhyasa Yoga. So he's giving us a brief understanding of meditation. So let's break down these ideas one by one. So the first idea, please.
Shutting out all external contacts.
Yes. So this does not mean you have to go to a place where it's completely dark and they have these things called samadhi tanks, I think they're called, and they're 98.6 and you're in salt water, so you float and there's no sound, no nothing. It artificially shuts out the senses. I've never done it. But the fact is you and I are unable to do that. It's not how it works. So let me give you a real live worldly example. When I was a boy, I was in love with reading. I don't know if any of you were as children. And I would be curled up on the couch in a book. My mother would say, "Jim, time for dinner," and I wouldn't even hear her. I guess you could say modern day kids, it's video games or something like that. Who's had that kind of an experience where you're not even aware? What is it that causes it? It's concentration. It was my absorption in the book that made the world disappear. So in the Raja Yoga tradition, we have dharana, which precedes dhyana. Dhyana is meditation. What is dharana? Got a yogi here.
Concentration.
Yes. So we learn to bring the mind to a single point. I was talking with a student who had just come back from a Vipassana retreat. And in that particular school of Vipassana, they want you to focus your attention on the space below the nostrils, above your lip, where you can feel your breath. Hold your attention there. Just be aware of the incoming and the outgoing. Or if you're doing japa, the silent repetition of a mantra, you keep bringing your mind back to it. So nothing else exists but your point of concentration and meditation. Almost doesn't matter what you use. So this becomes the methodology for uparati, sense withdrawal, or dharana, sense withdrawal. They mean the same thing. So we can't have absolute silence. We've got to learn to tune it out. Next idea.
Fixing the gaze between the eyebrows.
Again, there are various spiritual centers. You can focus your inner gaze on the third eye if you wish. This does not mean cross your eyes when you meditate. Once again, coupled with the first idea, it means bring your attention to a single point. You can use the third eye, point on the brow, the center if you wish. Use anything. Next idea.
Equalizing the outgoing and incoming breath, moving within the nostrils.
So, this is a reference to the whole science of pranayama. Pranayama is not control of the breath per se. It's the control of the vital energy. Those of you who study the martial arts, like Aikido or Tai Chi Chuan, the ki, the chi, it's the same thing as prana. So by controlling the breath, we learn to control the vital energy. So what we want to do is come to a place where the breath is equalized. Now, frequently, oh, by the way, the breath and the thinking are linked. Pay attention, you'll see it. If you're upset, your breath will be ragged, won't be deep and full. So my suggestion is, if you're going to do pranayama, you do that first. Then when you meditate, don't be too focused on the breath per se, but frequently between the incoming, the outgoing breath, or the opposite between the outgoing, the incoming breath, there will be moments of mental quiescence. Listen carefully. I'm not saying hold your breath. Breath be natural. Any thoughts on this? Next idea.
With senses, mind, and intellect controlled.
Yes. So if you hear something, you don't let your mind go racing on, what was that? Or the opposite, ice cream. Oh, after I meditate, I'm going to go eat ice cream. Bring the mind back to your point of attention. Senses and the mind as thoughts, feelings arise. Notice them. Gently bring the mind back to your point of attention. We don't want to get caught up in the theme of our thinking. The classic example is it's as if you're sitting on the bank of a river. Mind is the river. You just watch the stuff go by. Logs, a tree trunk, a boat. Our problem is the boat goes by, and the next thing you know, you're on the deck, and then you're down below going through the hole. Caught up with the theme of our thinking in the story. We go causation hunting. Meditation is not a period to accomplish anything. I'm going to go into meditation. I'm going to get an answer to this question about my job. That's a different exercise. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not meditation. Oh, I'm so upset. I'm waiting for a message from God to tell me what to do about my suffering. No. Don't try to see anything in meditation. Oh, I must be having a good meditation. Lord Krishna appeared to me. Tell him to get lost. It's just your mind. Let it go. No big deal. No big deals in meditation. And ultimately, I cannot think a real thought. No interior perception or external perception is real, is permanent. Next idea.
Having liberation as a supreme goal.
Yes. So again, don't get sidetracked into having ego-driven meditation. We have all these new agey kinds of things. I'm going to do affirmations to build my self-esteem. I'm going to do visualizations to get my Cadillac. Even good things. Oh, I'm going to send healing to my sister. Moksha, realization of my essential nature. That is the goal. Next idea.
Free from desire, fear, and anger.
So at least in meditation, can we quieten all the craving? Now, frequently, people get frightened of the disappearance of the ego. Oh my God, I'm going to be the hole in the donut. The mind doesn't want to let go. So notice the fear. Do your best. Just think of it as another thought. It was free from desire, fear, and what was the third one?
Anger.
Anger. All my resentments. Now, as we sit in meditation, desire, fear, and anger will unload out of the unconscious, and you keep letting it go. This doesn't happen in just one sit. You'd be surprised all the stuff that's in there in the mind. Quite humbling. Next idea.
The sage is verily liberated forever.
So, you either know who you are or you don't. You're not getting realized. You're not getting closer. You see it. You know. I've been meditating on the snake in the rope for 20 years now. The head of my snake has turned into a rope. I'm advancing. You're seeing the snake, you're still deluded. What's the ultimate test? If I think I'm a person, I'm caught in the web of delusion. Stop. Introvert the attentive faculty. Notice, who are you? Next idea?
That's it.
That's it. So that's kind of a quick contents of the 6th chapter. Is that the last verse?
Just one more.
One more.
Bhuktaram yajya tapasam sarvalokam maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shanti mricchati. Knowing me as enjoyer of sacrifices and austerities, the great Lord of all worlds, the friend of all beings, he attains peace.
Yes. So by the enjoyer of sacrifice and austerities, it means everything is done for the sake of self. What do we mean by that? Jim, I'm not very spiritual. I just want to get laid. Well, how are you going to feel if you get laid? Happy. Bet yourself. I want pizza tonight. How are you going to feel when you get pizza? Happy. Bet yourself. I really want a promotion at work. How are you going to feel if you get the promotion? Happy. Bet yourself. Everybody is doing everything for the sake of the self. I just don't know. So self-realization gives us essentially just two things. What I call existential freedom. Nothing will touch me. It's okay. It's safe. As Ram Dass said, even die is completely safe. And the second thing is, I finally have found out where happiness is. What I've been looking for, I've been looking with. It's myself. It's so simple. Now there's a little Upanishad verse, right?
Yeah. Om Tat Satiti Srimad Bhagwad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Karma Samnyas Yogo Nam Paschamodhyayaha. Thus in the Upanishad of the glorious Bhagwad Gita, in the science of the eternal, in the scripture of yoga, in the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, the 5th discourse ends entitled Yoga of True Renunciation.
Yes. So this sums up the teaching on karma yoga. We won't probably go back to it. It's incredibly important. And the suggestion is we practice karma yoga. And if we're successful at it, we will exhaust vasana without accruing new vasana. And the mind will more and more turn inward. And we will have subhaj. Subhaj is an auspicious desire, meaning the contemplative life, the life of the meditator, starts to become more and more attractive. So, to summarize, this. Act. We do not gain freedom by running away from the world. How should I act? According to your swadharma, your heart's deepest desires. No point in trying to do someone else's swadharma. Won't work. But do it in the yajna spirit, meaning the spirit of service, the spirit of sacrifice. Renouncing our attachment to the fruits of action. Right is to work alone, never to its fruits. So focus on enjoying what you do. Work to do what you love. And if that is problematic, practice loving what you do. Finally, the fifth element. Wasn't there a movie, The Fifth Element?
There was.
Fifth element here is the renunciation of the sense of agency. I am not the doer. It's guna and karma, the qualities of mind and the force of the past that are the agent. Who am I? The untouched, uninvolved witness of it all. 3, 4, and 5 exhaustively give us the tools for karma yoga. Any questions about this? And too frequently, people get caught up in, oh, I can be meditating. And then their lives are a train wreck. They hate their job, the relationships suck, and they're totally attached and reactive to the external world. Well, I know what the answer is. I'm going to run off to Mount Shasta. It's not the answer. Any thoughts of this, on this, before we march into chapter 6? Okay, notice Gita doesn't teach us to meditate until we've had 3 chapters of karma. All right, chapter 6.
So the chapter is called meditation.
Well, it's called Abhyasa Yoga, right?
Oh, it doesn't say the Hindi name or Sanskrit name.
It's called Abhyasa Yoga. And it's not called Dhyana Yoga, which I think is interesting. Abhyasa can be translated as meditation, but it's usually translated as practice. As practice. All right, let's start it out.
Shri Bhagwan Vacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Ya Sa Samnyasi Cha Yogi Cha Na Nirik Narna Chakriya. The Blessed Lord said, he who performs his bounden duty without depending on the fruits of actions, he is a sannyasi and a yogi. Not he who has renounced is without fire and without action.
So, in the tradition, going back thousands of years, we have the tradition of the sannyasi, the ascetic, the monk or the nun, who gives up worldly involvement, may live in a hut up in the Himalayas or in the forest, wears simple garments, frequently orange or saffron, is a bhikshu. What's a bhikshu?
Beggar.
Donation.
Beggar.
Beggar. What's Bhiksha?
Donation.
Hmm?
A donation.
It's food. So a sannyasi in the old-timey days had a begging bowl. And they were allowed to go to 3 houses once a day. Bhiksha, Bhiksha. And if you were the householder, you'd say, oh, here's your rice, here's your dal. But if they were poor, oh, Swamiji, we have nothing. Namaste. Go to the next house. You only can do it 3 times. And if you can't get fed after 3 times, you go hungry that day. So we have this long-standing tradition of holy asceticism. And it's certainly there in Christianity as well. Mike, you probably know more history about Christian asceticism. When did were the Benedictines the first? Oh, I guess it was the Desert Fathers even before that, right?
Yeah. So what happened was, Christianity in the beginning was a hard religion. It was persecuted. But when Christianity became the state religion, it became comfortable and something everybody needed to do. The Desert Fathers and Mothers and wanting to live something different than comfort and what was the norm, went to the deserts to kind of almost contradict the church or to be a different aspect of the church.
Yeah. That somehow leaving the world was a pathway to greater holiness.
It used to be called the red martyrdom, where you would get killed for your faith, you'd be bled. Well, then the Desert Fathers and Mothers became a white martyrdom.
Yeah.
You were no longer dying and bleeding, but you were still living a very painful life.
And in a sense, it's the dying of the self, the small self. So anyway, all over the world, we've had these traditions. And what Krishna is saying here, maybe a bit radical, is if you're drawn to asceticism, okay, but that's not what it's really about. Because a person can be very attached to how holy and how goody-goody they are. Jim, you look terrible. What's going on? I'm fasting. Or people would get the esteem of the community if they were a priest or a monk or a nun, or in India, if you were a Swami. High status. That's again, as Ch.5 said, spiritual materialism. So this verse is saying that's not what real renunciation is about. Now, there's no virtue in poverty. Many traditions say take vows of poverty. My experience, no one thinks about money more than the poor. There's that old saying, to a starving person, God is bread. But simplicity can be useful. So I like what the Buddha said about it, middle path. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Yam samyasamiti prahyur yogam tam vidhi pandava nahya samyasta samkalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. O Pandava, please know yoga to be that which they call renunciation. No one verily becomes a yogi who has not renounced thoughts.
Yes. So there's a very famous story in Yoga Vasishta, the story of Chudala. Any of you remember that story? Well, Chudala is married to Sikadvaja, and they are a king and a queen. And they get married when they're young, and they're hotties. And they really enjoy doing the mufti pufti with each other, and they like being rich. And they have all the things that being, royal give you. And then they grow older, and they both decide, short is this life, fleeting is youth and beauty. It's hard to chew your food when your teeth fall out. Let's strive hard for realization. So Chudala gives up her attachment to the world. She's got a really subtle mind. She does her tapas. She realizes her own self-nature. But Sikadvaja says, what I'm going to do is leave the kingdom and go into the forest. And I love this part. He says, wifey, you run the show while I'm gone. He dumps all his responsibility onto her. So he goes off to the forest, and for 18 years, he lives in a little thatched hut, wearing simple clothes, and he has his ritual vessels and objects, and he does various kinds of puja and ritual all day, 18 years, but he still gets no peace. Now, Chudala, who cared for him? The desire for siddhis arose in her. I love the Sanskrit because it's in the passive voice. It doesn't say she decided to get siddhis. It just, the desire arose. So this is as much a literary device as anything else. So she develops siddhis like being able to teleport and change her form. So she teleports into the forest and she sees dude's not having a good time. 18 years he's been at this and he still has no peace. He still doesn't know who he is. And then he realizes, I'm sure none of you women have ever been through this. If I go there as his wife, he's not going to listen to me. Has that ever happened to any of you? So she says, I'm going to change myself into a young Brahmin boy. She takes the name Kumbha, which means pot. And she, in the form of Kumbha, of course, before they were warrior caste. So she goes there as a Brahmin. Ooh, sacred Brahmin, sacred thread. He does Pada Puja, washes the feet, the flowers, the leg, the whole bit. Kumbha says, how you doing, dude? I've been doing ritual here for 18 years. I used to be the king, but I left it all behind. But still no peace. Kumbha says, well, the key to steady wisdom is renunciation, sannyas. Yeah, what do you mean? I renounced my kingdom, my wife, my money. No. All right. I will renounce my hut here in the forest and just wander. Buddha says that's not enough. Sikadvaja says, all right, I'll give up all my ritual vessels. I'll give up doing ritual. And Kumbha says, that's not enough. And he says, okay, I'll give up my clothes. I will wander around what the scriptures call sky clad. And I think they still have this on occasion, even in the big cities in India. You'll be like in Mumbai or Delhi, and you'll see some sadhu walking down the street stark naked, covered with ash. Do they still do that? Any of you have been to India recently?
Yeah, I've seen it, Jim.
Is that Shveta?
It's Hari Om, Jim.
Hari Om. So they call that sky clad. Saves on laundry. So Kumbha says to Sikit Vaja, that's not enough. He says, okay, I'm going to kill myself. I will give up this body. I'm going to go over yonder, jump off the cliff. And Kumbha says, that's not enough. And then Sikit Vaja is very discouraged. And he says, what else do I have to renounce? And Kumbha says, the only renunciation that's effective is to renounce the mind. Here Gita is saying renounce thoughts. Thoughts are the mind. How do I renounce my thoughts? I cannot get the flow of thought to stop. And if I did, I'd just sit there like an idiot drooling in a diaper. You know? And what Kumbha says, you have to give up your belief in the reality of your thoughts. To renounce the mind is to renounce my belief that my thoughts are real. Listen carefully, including all thoughts of self. You cannot think a real thought. And you have no thoughts or feelings of your own. Just see them go by. This is the only sannyas that's effective. Any thoughts on this? If so, don't believe them. Next verse.
आरुरुक्षोर्मुनेर्योगं कर्म कारणमुच्यते योगारूढस्य तस्यैव शमः कारणमुच्यते. For a muni or sage who wishes to attune to yoga, action is said to be the means. For the same sage who has attuned to yoga, inaction or quiescence is said to be the means.
So here the Gita clearly articulates a sequence of practice. Now, for any of you who come from Western traditions, and I think we've talked about this, one of my favorite texts is The Cloud of Unknowing. It's written by a 14th century anonymous English monk. And in it is the classic exegesis, the explanation of the story of Mary and Martha. Have we talked about this before in this class? No? Okay. So in the Bible, in the Christian part of the Bible, the New Testament, Jesus has these really good friends. It's a family. And there are 3 siblings, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. And he must have liked them a lot because he hung out at their house a lot. So he's over there. And, he's in the hot boat. So he's sitting there, he's deep in samadhi. And Mary is sitting at his feet. And she's tuned to him. Tuned up. Martha, as a good Jewish woman, is in the kitchen. Her thought is, my God, guests uninvited, what am I going to feed them? So Jesus didn't just come by himself. He probably brought a whole entourage. So I always imagine her in the kitchen, making matzah. Hair like this, flour, and because she's not getting it done in time for dinner. So she comes to the door and she says, Jesus, tell Mary to come into the kitchen and help me. Am I telling the story right, Mike? And Jesus says, he really does. He says, Martha, Martha. You're anxious over what you don't need to be anxious over. I tell you, Mary has the better part. And through history in Christian contemplative practice, Martha has symbolized what we call the active life. So if you're a monk or a nun, it means you're out there making wine, plowing the field, making cheese, illuminating manuscripts, whatever your job is, working. And Mary symbolizes what we call the contemplative life, where you've given up these externals and spend your time in yourself in quiet contemplative prayer, what we would call meditation. So it's sequential. So if you try to meditate and you're squirmy and you can't sit still, and it's just not for me. Who's had that feeling? Most of us have had it at one point or another. What that is what we call vasana pressure. That's the pressure of my vasanas, my desires, agitating my mind. More karma yoga. And do scripture study, satsang, meditate as much as you can. But if you focus on really doing the karma yoga, in time your mind starts to empty out. And then long periods of meditation become easier. The Lord calls us from the inside. When in the cloud, he says, the Lord calls you as his special friend. It's life of intense love. Very important point. And the two can be practiced together. Now, when it's time for you, if it becomes time for you to leave the world and spend hours in prayer and meditation, the Lord will clear the decks. And that will all become available by grace for you. It may look like a catastrophe on the outside. Losing a business, losing a love affair. your IPO goes public and you make $10 million. I have no idea what it'll look like. I left the world and went to an ashram. I don't know if any of you were old enough to have it where the Social Security prints out your income from all the years. Do you get that form? I don't get it anymore now that I'm on Social Security. But like in my late 50s and early 60s, I got it. I go back to those years. $0, $0, $0, $165, $0. I'm like, how did I live? I have no idea. No idea. Cosmic welfare. But I never missed a meal. Any thoughts on this sequential practice? All right, next verse.
Yada hinendriyarthishu na karma swanusajjate sarva sankalpa samyasi yoga rudhastadochyate. When a man is not attached to sense objects or to actions, having renounced all thoughts, then he is said to have attuned to yoga.
So here is a term that pops up frequently in Gita, yoga arudha. Arudha is a riding term, ashwarudha, mounting a horse. So the metaphor here is the horse is my mind, which is a strong, beautiful, but powerful beast. I was watching a video the other day of Queen Elizabeth when she was young. She'd been given a horse. Oh, I can't remember the horse's name. From the Royal Canadian Mounties. And she was riding, you know, their side saddle with her funny little hat. And there was an assassination attempt. I don't know if you all remember, it's back in the 80s. Somebody in the crowd fired a pistol 6 times. Luckily, it was just blanks. But her horse shied. See, it hurts. There's the side steps. She was a very good horsewoman. She easily brought the horse under control. So this is what you and I need to do to the mind. What does it mean? Having this equality of vision in heat and cold. This is a metaphor for all the extremes of the body. Sukham, dukham cha, suffering and pleasure. The reaction of the mind to conducive and non-conducive environments. Siddha, asiddha, accomplishment, failure, honor, dishonor. Always keeping everything sheep. This is a practice we not only do in meditation, but in the world. We don't rush toward points of pleasure. We don't run from difficult situations. Stay present. Keep the heart open. Just don't do something. Stand there. To attain to yoga rudha. Any thoughts on this? So if you've learned to tune up the mind, like many of you have here in class, then endeavor to like take a walk or wash the dishes or do the laundry or vacuum the house, keeping your mind in the state. And then expand it more and more into your everyday life. So you can practice meditation in action. When a person had attained to Yoga Rudha around Swamiji, if you were blessed with grace, he would scoop you up, keep you around. My dear friend Vilasini had that great merit. She was a teenager when she took the brahmachari training course. And then for 2.5 years, traveled all over the world as Swamiji's personal secretary. So deep in this abidance in the sound. Next verse.
उद्धरेदात्मनात्मानं नात्मानमवसाय साधयेत् आत्मैव यात्मनो बन्धुर् आत्मैव रिपुरात्मनः. Let a man lift himself by his own self alone, and let him not lower himself, for this self alone is the friend of oneself, and this self is the enemy of oneself.
So again, at the time the Gita was written, this word Atma was used in various forms. Here it means the personal self, the ego self, the jiva. So the mind is troublesome for the ignorant. It's out of control. I think I can't control my mind. I believe that. I can't help what I think. I was talking with a friend who was in recovery and he had a relapse. He said, I just like a zombie, all of a sudden. I went on like automatic, and then next thing I know, I'm out smoking crystal meth. That's how some of us see our minds. But for the yogi, the mind is my friend. And what he's also pointing at here, the locus of the energy is in each one of us. If you have stupid romantic ideas that, the guru is going to do it. I went to Baba Muktananda, he hit me with a feather, now I don't have to do a thing. I got hugged by Amaji, she's going to do it all now. Vibhuti, I have Vibhuti from Sai Baba, it's all done. Sai Baba's going to do all the work. Who's heard that particular story, especially Indians? Guru's grace is going to do it all. I don't care how much you pray to God or invoke the grace of the Guru, neither is going to do your dishes. There are some things we must do ourselves. We have this word in the tradition called Purushartha. Purusha Artha really means wealth, but when the two are put together, Purusha means person, means self-effort. Each of us must strive hard for realization. Now, there are some paradoxes in here. Yoga also says Ishvara Pranidhana, trustful surrender to God. Well, make up your mind. Do I do all the work, or do I turn my will and my life over to God? Yes. St. Augustine phrased it this way: pray like it all depends on God. Work like it all depends on you. So we must use our will and align it with God's will. I'm just a nasty, cruel person. I can't help myself. Yes, you can. You may need to pray to God to help you correct a bad habit. But we have to put in the effort. We have to put in the effort. It's a paradox. But armchair grace is ineffective. Many of the evangelical Christians fall into this. Well, I've turned my will and my life, or I've accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and He's forgive me anything. So it doesn't matter if I lie, cheat, and steal. I've been forgiven. That's nonsense. Are we going to fall short of the chosen ideal? Yes. But that doesn't mean we don't put in the personal effort. Did you meditate this week? Oh no, Jim, I didn't feel like it. Feelings aren't that important. I'm awfully sorry. What you need is a practice. Abhyasa. Oh, that's the title of the chapter. You need a practice. We need to deal with what I call the inner 2-year-old. I don't want to eat my vegetables. I want ice cream. I don't know about you, but there's a voice in this one like that. Set it on its stool. Person raises themselves by themselves into the sun. And don't lower yourself. Don't get caught up in the attraction of what in AA we call lower companions. People who are living a destructive lifestyle. Don't get caught up in the bitter morass of self-pity. Oh, my life is so terrible. I'm the worst pill in the world. Oh, I'm so bad that I'll never get any better. I think I'll just take Valium. Self-pity is a klesha. Be solution-oriented. Be solution-oriented. What's my issue? How can I begin to work on it? Now, we do need God's grace. And if you're like me, I have the mind of a rebel outlaw. Frequently, when I set my mind to task, I'm going to do this and not do that. My mind just rebels and does the opposite. Anybody else have a mind like that? So I specifically have to take the path of surrender. Constantly turning my will and my life over to God's care. Constantly asking for help. Okay, did I get all the pieces?
Yeah.
We'll quit here for now. And what verse are we on for next week?
We just finished 5. You're on 6.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.